Усім незламним потужного ранку.
Good morning. Good morning.
Today we'll discuss Zelensky reportedly threatening to attack Belarus after previously making statements on the matter.
That Belarus is the main source of a bit of aggression, a bit of this digression.
From the West, basically. What's happening, where to run, it's hard to say, but to make you believe me, I'll show you this digression right away.
Here, Zelensky gave Lukashenko digression. That's it.
Which is a Ukrainian source. The source writes, otherwise Ukraine will do it itself. What will it do? Let's take a look. Zelensky gave Lukashenko a week to remove the equipment from Belarusian territory that is adjusting fire on the Ukrainian population. If this doesn't happen, says Zelensky, then Ukraine will resolve the issue itself. How can Ukraine resolve the issue of equipment in another country which is on the border on the other side? Please tell me. To say, dear border guards, would you be so kind, please? Could you let us see our territories? It seems that naturally no one will go there through Ukraine, because if there are such units there, they won't leave on their own. So, what remains? War remains. I think there can't be another opinion. Zelensky said this after meeting with the president of Honduras. The most interesting thing is that the president of Honduras really did meet with Zelensky today. That's an interesting fact, and his name is Nasri Asfura. Oh, trade. Zelensky discussed the economy and digitalization with him, and he talked with Nasri. The world can rest easy. Everything is great, in my opinion. That is, Honduras, by the way, is a good country. Seriously. No jokes or anything. Not a bad country to live in. Highly recommended, but Uruguay is even better. If you're from Europe considering a move, choose Uruguay. Now, about Nasri. So, after talking to the president of Honduras, Zelensky started threatening the president of Belarus. He said the following. The president stated that equipment is deployed on the territory of Belarus along the border with Ukraine, which is used for adjusting. Strikes against the Ukrainian population. According to the head of state, Alexander Lukashenko has the ability to remove this equipment on his own. Well, actually, who else should remove it except by order of the commander-in-chief, which is Lukashenko? I think a week will be enough for him to do it, because right now, every day, our civilians are dying because of this. Wounded children are dying. If he doesn't do it, then we will, and that's it. And he stated that Belarus remains one of the main suppliers of fuel for the Russian army, and it can stop this support if there is political will, again from Alexander Lukashenko. Well, these are the kind of strange statements that came from the mouth of Zelensky, and there's even a video, if you don't believe me, with some black letters on a white background. Well, let's watch together what Zelensky said about Lukashenko. Here's the video, let's watch.
Alexander Grigoryovich Lukashenko is the leader of Belarus, a country that is our neighbor. Security at the border is very important for us.
It's clear that security at the border is very important, that's obvious. It's also important for Belarus as well, especially with such statements. Well, honestly, it's a shock.
I just understand that we're grown men already, right? No one gets offended just by words, by someone's personal remarks.
Oh, there was talk that Zelensky doesn't get offended by Lukashenko, but here he apologized and Zelensky really took it all to heart.
So it goes on.
It's about Lukashenko, or rather about Belarus, about the possible war there and the forces supposedly stationed on the border between Belarus and Ukraine. And here Zelensky brings in some of his own grievances. Well, what is this? This isn't diplomacy. Come on, seriously. Well, grievances in the diplomatic department and among diplomats, that's just how it is. You can jab at your opponent a little and do it in a way that sounds quite sophisticated. But talking about some personal grievances at a rather large meeting is pretty strange. Well, all right.
Thank God he apologized. Let's put it that way. Another thing is, when Mr. Lukashenko says that he doesn't want to be drawn into this war, here he should be honest, at least with his own people. Because it may not be him who gets drawn into the war, but his whole country.
Well, and Zelensky finally also stated that the whole country of Lukashenko, that is Belarus, could be drawn into the war. So it's not Lukashenko who will be drawn into the war, but Belarus will be drawn into the war. And then these statements came out, which is, well, quite strange. In short, Zelensky says the following: I'm not offended by Lukashenko's words, but along the regions bordering Ukraine there is equipment that adjusts fire on the Ukrainian population. A week is enough to remove it, to disable it, otherwise we will do it ourselves. Zelensky also reminded that from the very first days of the full-scale war, Russian missiles were flying into Ukraine from Belarusian territory, and at that time Lukashenko was also glad, supposedly because he wasn't controlling the situation. Plus, according to Zelensky, Minsk continues to help the Russian Federation. There are relays and equipment operating on Belarusian territory that are used to adjust strikes on Ukrainian civilian targets. So, well, I don't know. Is this some kind of Minsk-style declaration of war, or is it just a threat for the sake of a radio threat, or what is it? Write in the comments what you think about this, because in my opinion, all of this really looks like some kind of prelude to war with Belarus. So, if Zelensky isn't satisfied with just the war with Russia, now there's Belarus, and President Lukashenko of Belarus had previously stated that he doesn't want any war. And actually, well, it's true, now there are also nuclear weapons in Belarus from Russia, so in general it's a double-edged sword. So that's how it is. Savoy Zelensky is having a tough time regarding, or rather in relation to, recognition by the international community. So, one of the Ukrainian military units was named after, well, the heroes of the UPA, something like that. And the Poles, who say that about 100,000 of their soldiers and civilians died, according to them, I'm not an expert in history, so I'm just repeating what the Poles say. According to them, about 100,000 Poles died at the hands of the UPA, either directly or indirectly. Naturally, the Poles can't accept a partner, Ukraine, one of Poland's direct partners, naming its military units after what Poles consider enemies of Poland. Zelensky didn't respond, after which President Nawrocki stated that if this continues, Zelensky would be stripped of the Order of the White Eagle, and indeed he was stripped of it. The President of Poland, Karl Nawrocki, stripped Vladimir Zelensky of the Order of the White Eagle, the country's highest state award. This was stated on the website of the Polish president. Zelensky received this award in April 2023 from President Andrzej Duda for his contribution to the development of Polish-Ukrainian relations and cooperation in the field of security. Well, and the dispute arose here, just as I was telling you. At the end of May, the Ukrainian president, in addition to everything else, took part in the reburial of one of the leaders of this very OUN UPA, Andriy Melnik, and his wife in the Kiev region. As far as I remember, either the money for the cemetery rent ran out or something like that. They urgently reburied them, but didn't rebury the others. That's just talk, but there's some strange story there, and it's clear that the whole thing is murky. But the Poles don't like it, and that's the situation. Now the polls are starting, and it's clear that this doesn't end with just an order. Obviously, this order for Zelensky is useless, as they say. But Ukraine's agriculture directly depends on its European partners. Because in Ukraine, which is extremely poor right now, you can't survive on agriculture alone if you don't sell grain and other agricultural products abroad. And right away the Poles said, sorry, but accepting you into the EU threatens our own agricultural sector, so to speak. And we don't want to accept you. And after that, for example, Porto Portaginos Merz also stated that it is impossible to accept Ukraine into the European Union during the war. Although before they used to say that yes, it's possible, we'll just add a cluster, then another cluster, and cluster after cluster. And once we open all the clusters, once we give a powerful salvo from all political weapons, and just like that, Ukraine will be accepted. But it didn't turn out that way. And here again, in my Telegram channel, it is said that Ukraine's membership is impossible before the end of the war, according to Merz. But can Ukraine get the status of an associate member of the European Union? I already explained what an associate member of the European Union is right here. It's not just something random, let's put it that way. Ukraine is sitting somewhere on the sidelines of the European Union and watching how the EU distributes funds without having the opportunity to receive them. That's the truth again. Keeping in mind how much Ukraine has already received from the European Union, it's not all that clear, but nevertheless, in fact, at least de jure. De facto, okay, de jure, that's how it is. And on top of everything, Poland also got upset about not being at the negotiating table with Russia. For now, again, in my opinion, there is no one at the negotiating table between Ukraine and Russia at all, but the Poles want to get there. And the Poles are speaking through the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, saying that Europe, including Poland, should be represented at possible negotiations with Russia. Poland wants it, that's all. They want it but can't have it. They used to want it but stayed silent. Now they don't even do that. After the discussion began about who can represent the European Union at possible negotiations with Russia, Tusk says, "I clearly and precisely stated my position. These will be decisions in which Poland must take direct part, or we will not comply. No agreements." I'm curious, what can Poland actually refuse to do there? In global agreements, will they bomb Russia, Ukraine, or themselves? What will they do? That's what not complying with a peace agreement looks like. Let's suppose Trump actually manages to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. What will Poland do then? Bomb Russia on their own? I doubt it, to be honest. I really doubt it. But I have Polish acquaintances in Spain who came here purely to get away, to be far from Russia, Poland, and Ukraine as well. So, as they say, better safe than sorry. I can't blame them. I'm the same way. I moved early myself. Even when it all just started, with that Krygolium guy, the steamboat man. By Krygolium, I mean Poroshenko. Well, that's how it all turns out. The Prime Minister is not making this statement for the first time. Accordingly, it will probably be presented to all these foreigners, but that's not all. Ukraine continues to attack Crimea. There were people in the comments saying, "This is funny, how Ukraine keeps attacking Crimea like that." For example, they bombed Crimea's only gas storage facility. It's mentioned right here. There's even a video. On the night of June 19, they attacked the Glebovskoye underground gas storage facility. There's only one gas storage facility on the peninsula in Crimea. Well, here's roughly how it happened. It hit pretty hard, so where do I mute the sound here? There. They're bombing all sorts of things here, like fuel trucks and that very gas storage facility, and they're showing how it happened. So, a drone is flying, and no one is shooting it down. Maybe there's no air defense. Maybe it's there, but it's not working well. And so it freely gets into a pretty complex part of the system. One drone strikes, then a second drone strikes, then a third. And it keeps going like that. This is a facility near the village of Dozornoye on the Tarkankut Peninsula. It was hit by, well, these operators. The ground facility, as they say, sustained critical damage. A fire broke out. Medium-range drones were used to strike the target. On top of that, there are a few more hits, but those are smaller, so we won't list them all because right now everything and everyone is being hit there, from both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. If we were to list everything, honestly, there wouldn't be enough time on air. But there is also information about a major target. In Crimea, Russian mobile fire teams have started escorting fuel trucks specifically to counter drones. It is reported that Russian forces have increased security for fuel logistics on the occupied peninsula. Fuel trucks now travel accompanied by anti-aircraft guns. And this was reported by the media. Here we can see those very anti-aircraft guns. Well, it's not very clear here, but nevertheless, there it is driving in front. The anti-aircraft gun is escorting the Crimean fuel trucks. So in other words, they're starting to overcome this drone blockade, which allowed Ukraine to cut Crimea off from fuel, and as a result, a rather severe shortage has arisen there. How effective this method of protection is remains unknown, but nevertheless, it is reported that a large number of rapid response mobile groups are being observed along the main logistics routes in Crimea. And this was actually noticed by people who were passing by, despite the fact that filming and posting all this online is strictly prohibited. Then what? Then Macron suddenly woke up. Before that, he wasn't doing anything except a compartment meeting with Zelensky and his associates, with the appropriate accessories. Then every day there are some strong statements, then Macron is against peace. And indeed, that's true. I made a video today where I said that France and Germany are against peace in Europe. The wonderful Netherlands and Denmark joined them, as far as I remember, and said that now is not the time to just talk to Russia. Well, that's how it is. It's not the time for a truce. You see, the budget is being spent. Come on, in the middle or even closer to the beginning of the financial year, you're talking about some kind of truce. You don't understand anything about these matters, about these sausages. What are they called again? Ah, so what did he say? Macron, he stated that in August 2025, US President Donald Trump almost made a fatal deal with Putin regarding Ukraine. A fatal one, of course, not for Macron, but for Ukraine. Trump was eager to reach a peace agreement as soon as possible, so he was ready to accept the Kremlin's terms, as Macron stated. Well, then he saw the planes flying, that Zelensky would bomb everyone, and he thought that Ukraine would lose, and everything went from there. So it was Europe that saved Ukraine from an unfavorable peace agreement. The French leader explained that it was Europe's efforts that convinced Trump to agree to such a deal. A special delegation urgently flew to the United States, where they explained to the White House that such a deal was unacceptable. I'm not sure if Macron is being sly or truly doesn't know, but we were shown videos and photos of these journeys of European leaders through the corridors and offices of the White House, where Trump was walking ahead. They were all walking, talking about something, and behind them was NATO Secretary Rutte. Well, that's it. They had a meal and left, and someone like Zelensky didn't even get to eat back then. Overall, it's a strange statement from Macron. And in addition, Ukraine is now refusing peace, even a temporary one. So France and Germany apparently talked to Zelensky, and this is what we have. In Ukraine, earlier, there was talk about the possibility of introducing a limited ceasefire with Russia, but now sources claim that's not true. According to the source, the idea of a limited ceasefire being discussed doesn't exist. The source emphasized that such scenarios are not being considered by the country's leadership right now. There is no phased freezing of hostilities. In general, all these discussions about peace agreements come up sporadically. Well, and Russia puts forward demands for the recognition of the annexation of Crimea, meaning both de jure and de facto for it to be Russian, and Donbass as well, which is unacceptable for Ukraine. So that's how things are, and in light of all this, it's interesting, at least for me, and I think for you too, what our powerful leaders think today about Ukraine and all of this. Let's first take a look at this guy from the mountains who gets right to the heart of it and tells all sorts of things. As usual on the telethon, the journalist is sleeping. Apparently, it's already a good tradition to take a nap during working airtime. Or maybe he's meditating, maybe he's opening his chakras, maybe he's opening his third eye. Who knows, with his hairstyle and that forelock, I can't hide it anymore, but he definitely could. So this uncle from the meadow says the following.
I can just emotionally imagine how Putin is squirming. I'm not a military expert, but from what I've heard, deoccupying Crimea likely isn't possible without a ground assault. For them, Crimea is something special.
In short, the old man is planning to occupy Crimea or deoccupy it or capture it. He's planning to do something with Crimea using an assault force. And he says that he's not a military man himself, but according to the military, deoccupation of Crimea is impossible without a ground operation.
Ukraine will definitely win.
I think the journalist got tense too, like me, since it's very hard to understand what the old man says. You can, but only if you really focus. Because there are no vocal punctuation marks at all. It's just a continuous stream of text. It's like, hello, good morning, how are you? I brushed my teeth, had some coffee, bought a croissant, it was really tasty. And now we're going to talk about peace all over the world. Peace all over the world is good. I talked to the military, but this is just crazy. Why let speakers like that appear before our very eyes? Well, I understand he has a few little books behind him. So, he apparently looks through them regularly. But it would also be good to practice speaking. Because, well, you're in front of some kind of audience. I mean, what is that? Then there's this little guy. He's extremely mean. By the way, whenever they show him, he's always this draft dodger, really mean. He says things like that. Now he's saying that peace is impossible. You can't have it. Peace is scary. We need war. At the same time, he's getting bigger and bigger. Day by day, from one speech to another. But he's not going to fight or help the country in any way. Well, that's natural. That's understandable.
Energy resources will be sufficient, but then things will gradually decline, and the oligarchs will begin to withdraw.
I won't remind you what goes through the pipes along with such characters, but write in the comments what you think about this.
I'll repeat. I'm afraid Trump might offer them a deal to stop the fighting. Would Ukraine accept? Probably not, but it's possible.
Ukraine is holding out. He naturally associates himself with a powerful leader who decides the fate of an entire country with millions of inhabitants. For some reason, he decides this in a cozy studio.
Ukraine may be told, if you want peace, cooperate. That's what worries me.
Well, I also have, those dangers.
Sure.
two draft dodgers are talking about how they're worried that suddenly Ukraine will go for peace. Well, that's understandable. I'm more than sure that if they have relatives, they're probably somewhere abroad too. No one is fighting either. No one is defending the eastern borders either. The western ones, sure, they're probably defending them somewhere in Spain too. I'm defending Spain's borders, but I'm not sending anyone to war. But these characters, yeah, and it all looks kind of strange. Then there's another draft dodger. He lives with them in Trebalt or Austria. He's always in front of some wall. Either he has a painted bathroom or something like a kokoshnik. I don't get it. And he considers himself a former serviceman like all of them. I mean, he spent a couple of weeks somewhere near Kiev. He made up some injuries for himself. He slipped abroad to avoid being drafted again. By the way, one of these tough guys actually had a criminal case opened against him. And yet they keep making statements from abroad that people need to go. To fight, that you should go and fight, you should go and fight. And you, oh no, I already kind of fought, they say. Well, that's how it is. Well,
negative. This is an unpopular story. Think it over and work it out. There's no popularity in the organization, but as someone who served, I can still speak to those who can serve. When we have a president, I thought about something. He is the commander-in-chief and he stays silent because of the attacks.
yeah, everything's already blending for me. I invented stealth technology. Now with my t-shirt and some of my beard, I'm merging in just like them. Guess I need to shave. Okay, let's keep listening.
Why can't we invite those people who understand these issues, professionals, those who can? For example, on my shows, Serhiy Krivonos explains everything in detail.
Well, sure, anyone can explain things there, but not everyone can do it. Alright, well that's how things are. So we have these three topics in one. Some don't want peace, others want war, and here Zelensky is threatening Belarus with war. What's going on? Well, the further it goes, the harder it is to understand. Write in the comments if you really understand what's going on. By the way, I've seen comments more than once where someone says, you don't understand, but I'll explain it now. It would be nice if you also used commas, by the way, when doing so. When describing your clairvoyance, but in general, write what you think about this. I'd be glad to see it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, by the way. I'd really appreciate it too. Bye, everyone.
Closer to peace than ever. These are direct quotes that Zelensky said. I think all these statements have already caused enormous harm, first of all, to people of conscription age. There are a lot of people, as they like to say now, draft dodgers. Well, no one is really eager, but maybe not too much either. These people are running away somewhere. But if the Supreme Commander-in-Chief says that the war will end soon, then what's the point of rushing anywhere or going somewhere? People think, I'll just wait it out for a couple more months, half a year, and the war will be over. This message keeps appearing. We have reached, so to speak, the same horrors of mass bombings and shelling.